Alright, this is it. All we have left to do is finish the lining to the zipper and our neckline and a little bit at the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. The first thing we're going to do here is trim the seam allowance here just on our fashion fabric. Okay, we're going to trim that back to 1 inch. Alright, and I'm going to use my pinking shears and I'll just eye it. So I'm pinking that down to 1 inch. This one, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Just pink it right down to 1 inch. Be careful to only trim the seam allowance of the fashion fabric and nothing else. Okay. Next thing we want to do is we have if you've put this in yours, we have this piece of bias hair form, okay, that kind of supports that neckline a little bit, gives it a little more strength. We're going to trim that even, so we'll tuck it right in here as far as we can, and then just trim it even. So we just want that to just hide right underneath, like so. It should line up even, like that. There we go. Just going to put a pin in that for now. And I'll do the other side as well. Put that in. Okay. Now we can finish stitching. Oops, before we do that. Now what we can do is we want to figure out where our lining is supposed to end. Okay? We're getting very close here. So we want to fold the lining under, like so, so that it's about 1/4 of an inch away from our zipper teeth. Okay? So I'm just going to fold that lining and kind of leave it about 1/4 of an inch. I'll just pin it in place, and we're probably going to take out these pins, but I just want to get it even. I'll probably want to trim back that lining seam allowance a little bit too, but before I do that, I want to make sure I get it where I want it before I cut anything off. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Just need a little bit more of adjustment here. Fold that under. So this is just, you gotta kind of play with it a little bit to get it the right size so it matches. Okay, I'm getting a little bit of ease in here, so I'm going to adjust that through. Here at the bottom, I'm folding up my seam allowance right along the stay stitching on my fashion fabric. And then the same thing on the lining, I'm going to fold that up. And eventually the lining is going to actually wrap around this edge. But first I'm trying to get the right size for my lining. There, I'm just going to pin that in place for a moment. Okay. Let me adjust this a little bit. Bring that lining up a little higher. Again, you're just going to have to play with it. About there. Looks good. Okay. Just going to kind of crease that with my hands. And I can unpin it. Open this up. And you can see all this extra lining. I'm going to trim that down to 1 inch now as well. I don't need all that. Okay, again here at the bottom, I have my seam allowance. Okay, folding right along my stay stitching. Same thing here. I'm going to wrap the seam allowance of my lining around that seam allowance at the bottom, like so. See if I can get a better angle for you. Okay, so it's wrapping around the seam allowance like that. And hiding it. Okay, so it looks clean all the way down. Pin that now. Again, let's go ahead and pin our lining. So it takes a little bit of time to adjust it and stuff to get it right, but once you do, it'll look really good. Okay, there we go. It's more even right here. Okay, so there's the bottom. You can see this is the seam allowance of the bottom right here. You can see how the lining wraps around it, finishes that edge. Okay, there is a little bit of machine stitching we have to do. and that's to finish off our facing, which we'll stitch on. We'll continue stitching our facing on. Just going to pin all that in place. Okay, so that side is all ready to be finished. Okay, now we'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, again, fold that right up at the stay stitching, and then we'll fold this right around it. Okay. Okay, so we have a little bit of machine sewing left, and that's just right here and right here where our facing. We need to finish attaching our facing. And then the rest of this, sewing the lining to the zipper and then the bottom edges, will be done by hand. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that, and then we'll come and finish the rest of it. We're at the machine here. Let's go ahead and finish stitching this. Half inch. Get right up in there. Go. All right, and then before I go to the other side, I'm going to finish understitching this facing. Okay, there's one side, that's all done. Let's go ahead and do the other one. Go. And now we just need to understitch it. Yes. All right, let's head back to the table. All right, so now we can finish closing up our neckline, okay, that we've stitched it. So I have this extra facing coming out here. I only needed about an inch of that, so I'll trim that back. And that's just going to fold around like so. So it's folding around this seam allowance right here. And then it's going to fold down. Okay. So I'll fold that down. And pin that right in place. And the same thing on the other side. Trim this back to an inch. Fold that right around that seam allowance. And fold it down. And now we can go ahead and do our handwork. Alright, so in the next video, we'll do all the handwork here, and we'll be ready to go.